Without delay, I think we should start the session. Abhishek sir, it's okay to start now?
Yes.
So, a very warm good afternoon to all of you. I am Ashwani Ashok from CEED, and on behalf of CEED and the Asia Foundation, I welcome you all to this international webinar on transboundary renewable energy trade between India and Nepal. For a year and a half now, we have been having multiple stakeholder meetings along with the government departments as well, and all have been quite appreciative of this issue and the approach, and they have shared their views and insights with us as well. We have been in touch with the Energy Minister of Nepal, Energy Minister of Bihar, Shri Bijendra Yadav as well, and they have also been quite supportive of this issue. In fact, Energy Minister of Nepal has also conveyed that once all the situation eases out, he would be taking this forward with the meeting with the government officials and all. And Energy Minister of Bihar is already very proactive on this approach on the plan. Is very proactive on this approach, and he has given his regards for this, and he has also asked the union government to actually throw some light, have the discussion and take this forward. They have also asked, even a few days back, CM of Bihar has already written to the Prime Minister of India to expedite all the issues related to water and this hydropower projects with Nepal, so that all the things are in control. So without taking much of the time, I think we have two esteemed panelists from Nepal and one esteemed panelist from India with our moderator as well. So I'd request Abhishek Pratap, our expert from ASER, to kindly take this thing forward. However, I would also request all the participants to kindly switch on their videos so that we can we can see each other and have a very interactive session all throughout this 1 hour discussion we are having, right? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ashwini. Can all of you hear me properly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
so it's my pleasure hosting this or moderating this session on the India-Nepal trans energy trade, and it's an issue which is quite close to my heart also. I used to also work on this issue some time back. And I'm from Bihar, knowing that this is a very critical issue for both Nepal and Bihar, how we can share the energy resources to both countries, both regions, and how can we build a sustainable energy infrastructure which can help meeting the development challenges of the both countries. With this note, before I will start in the framing of this in a panel discussion, I would like to, for rest of the participants, an introduction of the three esteemed panelists who are today in this discussion. I start with Mr. Vinod Kumar Agarwal. Mr. V.K. Agarwal, who is the technical director of SARI EI in ERADE. The SARI EI is the South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Integration. And it's if I'm not wrong, it is in a project which is for quite some time, more than is running in India. And it was one of the first official project which started looking into the transboundary energy trade in South Asia. So Mr. Agarwal has a huge pile of knowledge and information about on the transboundary energy trade, and I think we will be much benefited from with his presence in today's discussion. Little more on Mr. Agarwal. He is also responsible for steering this technical function under the SARI EI program for harmonizing the policy and regulatory framework and advancement on transmission network and development of the market towards enhancing cross-border energy trade. He is a engineer by education, by training. He's a alumni of IIT Delhi, and 40 years of experience in the power sector. And he is also was a executive director of POSOCO, the Power System Operation Corporation, and he headed the northern and southern regional grid as well as the national grid. So, welcome, Mr. Agarwal, for this panel discussion. We have two esteemed panelists from Nepal. The first is Mr. Kumar Pandav, who is the executive chairman of the National Hydropower Company Limited and also a vice president of Independent Power Producer Association Nepal, IPAN. And he's also the director of Millennium Challenges Account Development Board of Nepal. Mr. Pandey is also has a massive experience and huge experience in power sector of 25 years working in development, project management, engineering management in the US and Nepal. He is a Fulbright scholar from National Polytechnic Institute, New York, USA, with an MBA degree. Mr. Pandey has an extensive experience in the hydropower industry, and so with his presence, we will able to learn more about the hydropower sector and its challenges in Nepal, and how India will be benefited from the good potential, massive potential of the hydropower in Nepal. Mr. Pandey is also, I already said that is a chairman of a national hydropower company, NHPC. Last but not the least, the third panelist in today's discussion is Engineer Gyanendra Lal Pradhan. He calls himself as an hydropower enthusiast and entrepreneur. He's a executive chairman of Hydro Solution Private Limited, Nepal. Mr. Pradhan has been directly involved in many of the hydropower projects in Nepal, like in Baramchi, Karnavati, Lower Modi, Anku, Upper Kumudi, and Kalyang Daki Gorg. He is also member of the Economic Advisory Council of the then Prime Minister of Nepal in 2012. So welcome Mr. Pradhan, Mr. Pandey, and Mr. Agarwal to this panel discussion. To start with this, I will take a little bit like a 2 to 3 minutes of framing this whole panel discussion, and will ask each of the panelists to make an opening remark about in 7 to 8 minutes. We would like to keep this discussion for 30 minutes and then open up for a question answer for 20 minutes. And the last 5 to 7 minutes, we will keep it for closing remark from the panelists. So as Ashwini already spoke about, there's India and Nepal as a close neighbor, has a unique ties of friendship and cooperation, characterized by the open borders and deep-rooted people-to-people contact. And there is a long tradition of the free movement of the people across the border. India and this peoples-to-people movement has also expanded significantly in the trade and economics of both the countries, and also deep-rooted cultural and political relationships between the two countries also. Although the last few months on the relationship on the political side is in a little downhill, but we all expect that kind of a deep-rooted relation between two countries, it will definitely going to be bounced back. India is moving toward high power demand trajectory, ambitious renewable targets in the short term as well as in the medium term. And there is a massive renewable energy potential exists in India with a 900 gigawatts. There is a new regulatory provisions on the transboundary electricity trade has come up recently with an amendment in the Central Electricity Act, which is, I think, is the first time it has come up in Electricity Act very prominently. There is also a new concept which the Indian Prime Minister has started, and now the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy started developing that concept is the One Sun, One World, One Grid, and particularly keeping the solar energy and the International Solar Alliance in center. On the other hand, Nepal also has a good significant targets of around 17 gigawatts, which they want to develop by 2024. But more importantly, Nepal has a massive hydropower potential in the range of around 43 gigawatt. And this is the economic potential, not the technical potential. So it means that technical potential definitely will be higher, but is that 43 gigawatt which can be doable. Current demand is very low in Nepal with around only 1.5 gigawatt, but there's expectation that is going to increase because as high aspiration of electricity is in the country. Energy transfer between the two nations, majorly from Bihar, is happening, but is predominantly focused on the fossil fuel-based power from Indian side. So from here, it comes in a more a topic of this panel discussion that how transboundary energy trade on the renewable energy resources of both countries can be developed, which help not only in meeting the energy targets of both the countries, but also going to address a lot of other economic and social challenges, like in disaster management, like water availability, like agricultural productivity. And with this, given low consumption and high potential renewable energy in Nepal, as well as an owing to the deficit in the dry season and surplus in the wet season, particularly in context of the hydro, and India having a deficit in the wet season and evening period, particularly from the solar energy point of view, whether the transboundary electricity trade seem to make more sense for the benefit of both the countries. With this, I would like to invite Mr. V.K. Agarwal for opening remarks. And what I heard that you have a presentation also to make. But in the presentation, I would also like you to focus on two issues, two questions, which I'm anyway interested, and I think the other participant also will be interested to know about, that how you see the transboundary energy trade is shaping up in South Asia. Given your so much of experience in the SARI EI project, and in your view, what are the challenges you see at the regulatory as well as the market and investment level, which need to be addressed? So, Mr. Agarwal, over to you.
Thank you, Abhishek, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks again for giving me an opportunity to talk on the subject, which is close to my heart. And I have just to optimize the usage of time, I have a presentation, and basically, yeah, this is. So basically the challenges and opportunities on Indo-Nepal RE trade and ways to accelerate this RE energy trade. And before we talk on the exact subject of the RE trade, I like to look at the current power supply position of Nepal, would like to look at some numbers, and would like to share with you that how the RE trade can be strengthened between the two countries and within the region. So let us look at these numbers. What I am trying to show is what is the growth in peak demand and energy availability in Nepal during last 6 years. Third column is showing the annual percentage increase in the peak demand, and the sixth column is showing annual percentage increase in the energy. If you look at the right side, the purple is basically showing the growth in energy, and red is showing the growth in peak demand. And if you really look at the trends, the growth in peak demand is lower than the growth in energy, annual growth. The 2019 figure minus 12.4% in peak demand, it's a provisional figure, but generally the growth in peak demand is in the order of 5 to 6%, while the growth in energy is of the order of around 12 to 20%. If that is the type of growth in peak demand and energy, it basically gives a particular inference, and the inference is growth in peak demand is lower than the growth in total energy. This shows it is a case of suppressed and restricted load during the peak conditions. And there are opportunities of growth subject to availability of power. Why I am telling this thing is, since the growth in the energy is higher, so whenever the energy is available, generally the possibility of energy having available during rest of the day is definitely higher. And because of the growth in the energy, it is taking up all that energy. During the evening peak hours, definitely there would be a restricted availability. That is how the growth in the peak demand is lower than the growth in energy. So this is one inference we have derived. The second slide, this I am showing the share of different sources in total energy available in Nepal. There are three main sources are there. One is the contribution from NEA's own hydro generation. Second is contribution from the independent power producers of Nepal. And third is cross-boundary energy trade. And all these figures again are for last 6 years. The purple color shows the NEA in terms of percentage, the NEA's power available from the NEA's own generating sources. And as we can see, the percentage contribution is decreasing year by year. It started with 49%. And ultimately, it has now settled down to 33, 34% or so. This has its own share has reduced. Green is basically showing the cross-border energy trade. And cross-border energy trade, what we are seeing is from 28, 27%, it is gradually increasing in the order of around 35, 33, 37% or so. And the red is showing the IPP's generation. And there also the share is increasing from 23%, 23, 28 and around 30%. So it is reducing, share is reducing in case of NEA's own hydro generation and increasing in case of cross-border and the independent power producers. So what inference we derive out of this? There is an increase in overall share in the power purchase from IPPs, a positive development towards market. There is an increase in overall share in cross-border trades, a positive step towards leading economy and efficiency. We come to third slide. This basically what it is showing is, it is showing the ratio of dry/wet period. What has been the ratio of dry/wet period in different parts of the Nepal. This slide is showing total energy transfer from India to Nepal. And as we can see from year 16, 17, 17, 18 and 18, 19. If 18, 19 we see in the month of July, the import is 183 gigawatt hour. And in the month of January, which is a dry, it is 352 gigawatt hour. So this particular ratio is changing from 150% to 180% to 200%. In the year 2018-19, it was 200% if we see the ratio between dry to wet period. If same thing, if we look at the energy transfer from Bihar system to Nepal system, as Abhishek had stated in his opening remarks also, in a number of radial feeders, the power supply is being supplied from Bihar to Nepal. And it is supplying generally in the eastern part of the Nepal. And here, if we really see the ratio, in the month of July 18, it is wet period, it is 144 gigawatt hour. Basically, average comes out to 144 megawatt, and in terms of gigawatt hour, 107 gigawatt hour. And in case of dry period, it is 146 gigawatt hour. And here the ratio is 135%. So what inference of energy consumed during dry to wet period? It's a sign of natural load growth and matching transmission network as far as the overall Nepal system is concerned. Low ratio of energy consumed during dry to wet period, whether in certain pockets, that is the eastern pocket, is sign of constrained transmission network and supply of power. Basically on the eastern side, since it is on the radial mode and all that, and again sometimes constrained by the network which is available in the Bihar system, the radial network and all that. So there it is basically the growth is coming out to be slightly on the lower side, which shows a sign of constrained transmission network. So if we overall inference we can draw from this is, there is a positive move in the direction of increasing market share and cross-border trades, sign of economy and efficiency. There are opportunities towards increase in the demand subject to relative power, avenues towards overall growth. There are predominant limitations in certain areas towards meeting full demand, sign of transmission, oblique supply constraints. So this is as far as the Nepal's power system numbers are concerned. I straight away jump to the point of the RE trade. As we can see, the picture on the left side basically shows there are 350 gigawatt hydro potential is there in the South Asia, and the utilized potential is only 61 gigawatt. That is 18% has been utilized. In India, the utilization is of the order of 30%, and in Nepal, lot of potential, untapped potential is available. Right now, it is only out of 83, 1% has been utilized, around 1 gigawatt. And so basically lot of potential is available for tapping in India as well as in Nepal. Now we look at the solar and wind potential in India. In solar, out of 750 gigawatt, only 35 gigawatt, that is 4% potential has been tapped. And in case of wind, out of 373, only 38 gigawatt, that is 10% of potential has been tapped. So lot of wind and solar potential is available in India as far as India is concerned. This is a strong transmission grid which is already prevailing in India, a large transmission network with number of HVDC links. Then there are green energy corridors which can carry a lot of renewable power from one part of the other grid. And there are statcoms and all that. The devices are there which can control the voltages during low generation period and all that. So basically what I am trying to show is the potential for renewable generation is there, hydro as well as wind and solar, the potential for grid transmission that is available, the devices are available which can control the voltages. Having looked at this thing, now let us look at the individual pictures of the Nepal and India. If we look at the India, right now, the renewable penetration is of the order of 35%. If I look at the upper circle, green color, 35% including the hydro. In 2022, we are expecting it to be around 47% and 2027 around 55%. That is from the renewable energy sources including hydro. Nepal, fortunately, the whole of the potential is hydro potential, it's a renewable potential only. So as far as renewable potentials are concerned, both are there. But one particular aspect which has to be looked into is, in India, other than the wind and solar potential, there is a substantial percentage from the coal-based thermal generation also. And there is a possibility during the evening peak periods, some balancing power, which the hydro potential from Nepal can definitely be a good substitute. So India, though, as far as its INDCs are concerned, nationally determined contributors are concerned, India would be very well matching those targets. But for balancing, the hydro potential available in Nepal can definitely be utilized. We come to the BBINS region, the BBINS sub-region, Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Sri Lanka. And as we can see on the left side, basically in case of Bangladesh, we can see the most of the generation is from coal, lignite, natural fossil fuel based generations are there. Bhutan, of course, is green. India, it's a mixed combination, a good percentage of from the fossil fuels. Nepal, it is all hydro. And Sri Lanka, again, good percentage of fossil fuels are there. So there is in the BBINS itself, other than Bhutan and Nepal, the other three countries have good percentage of the fossil fuels, particularly Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. And if we look at the prices, also average generation cost in these countries, as we can see, in case of Bhutan, India, and Nepal, they are in the range of around 4 to 5 cents. While in case of all other Bangladesh, particularly in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, if we look, it is of the order of 7 cents or 11 cents. So two major points are emerging out. Some of the countries, they have a high percentage of fossil fuel based generation, and they have a very higher cost, means the cost generation in India and Nepal, particularly Nepal, can replace this costly generation. So conclusion and way forward, I'll just like to sum up is hydro potential developed in Nepal can be of immense value towards meeting the balancing requirements in India. In the BBIN region, the RE generation in some of the countries, particularly India, Nepal, and Bhutan, can replace the fossil fuel-based costly generation in some other countries, particularly Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. There is an immediate, but these are the 2 points which are very, very strong favorable points for RE trade. There is an immediate requirement towards strengthening the transmission network in Nepal, internal as well as cross-border. This is a requirement. When we look way forward for exporting good quantum of power from Nepal to India or other parts of the region, definitely the transmission network, that is the strengthening of the transmission network, is very much required. The internal network as well as the cross-border network, that requires to be strengthened. Then different areas operating in Nepal system in isolation need to be configured and operated in the integrated mode. That is also another very important point. Right now, I understand Nepal, it is operating in 3 or 4 areas. And even in this COVID period, also on the western side, some of the hydro generation, for instance, it could be, it was spilled, could not be used because of that network. Had the network been there, some of the power through the link between India and Nepal, perhaps power could have been transferred. So these systems have to be integrated. Even in Bihar, when we say the radial system, it is a constrained area, but once it all is integrated, then definitely it can go through Bihar, it can go through the Dalkebag Muzaffarpur link also. So that is how the different areas operating Nepal systems, they also need to be operated in integrated mode. So in my opening remarks, I think I'll stop here and maybe look for any questions right now or maybe at the end of the session, whatever you feel like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. It was a really very insightful presentation. I myself learned a lot of information. I was jotting down also a lot of these information what you shared in your presentation. So it's I hope that other participants also find it is a very useful presentation, which gives them a picture about what is happening in South Asia on the transboundary energy trade, as well as in India and Nepal, in terms of how this opportunity can be explored. So thank you, Mr. Agarwal, for a very insightful presentation, and we will take up the questions later on. I would like, without wasting much of time, I would like to move on to my next speaker, and the next speaker is Mr. Kumar Pandey. Sorry, sir, Kumar Pandey. And Mr. Pandey, I would like to ask you a very specific question. One is, as a representative of independent power producer and himself as an hydropower producer, how you see the transboundary energy trade between India and Nepal shaping up? In your view, how you see the challenges we need to be addressed in what level, whether it's the regulatory level we need to first focus on, or whether it's the market and investment level? Because in the complete picture, Mr. Agarwal has presented on the trade scenario in South Asia. And the following question also, if you like, if you can address that, is despite so much of potential and willingness at the government level in both the countries, why the transboundary energy trade is not taking off significantly between India and Nepal? Mr. Pandey. Pandey,
thank you. First of all, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Great. Thank you for having me participate in this program. I hope you're all well in this difficult time for all of us and you're keeping safe. I'll get right into the matter. As private sector, we will focus on the business aspect of all our transactions. So for the business then, you know, there's a, the business basically is where's the market, right? So for the business to happen, there has to be suppliers, there's to be demand for it. Then there needs to be the physical connectivity for power. And then we need the regulatory mechanisms to be in place for the trade to take place. So these are the four basic components that are necessary for us to actually be engaged in this. Now, if you go back a little bit,
We're not able to hear you, sir. Are you there, sir?
In the energy sector? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
No? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I think it may be a bandwidth issue. If you just take out the picture, possibly you may have better bandwidth.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
Great. So I'll switch off my video. Maybe you're right. It's a part of the bandwidth issue. So the enabling environment requires that all these components of the market, the conducive environment for the market, then the physical connectivity and the regulations all be in place. So we are now in a situation where even before the COVID started, that India has invested quite heavily in the energy sector. Can't hear me again? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a good chance that if there's a lack of market, that there's a good chance that there's going to be a lot of default, and there are going to be requirements of huge bailouts both in India and in Nepal for utilities because of the lack of market. So we are now looking at a situation where if we don't grow, India is going to have problems, Indian utilities are going to have problems, and Nepali utilities and producers are going to have problems. Nepali private sectors have invested quite heavily in the hydro sector. In the next 3 years, we'll be generating another 3,000 megawatts. Now, at this time, we are not really sure where the market for that 3,000 megawatt is going to be. If you looked at the charts that Mr. Agrawal showed a few minutes ago, we're actually seeing a decline in growth rate in Nepal. We're almost reaching a point where we're not being able to create any market within the country. So the 3,000 megawatts that are under construction, if they do not find a market, that will mean someone in the Nepal system will have to be, will suffer tremendously, and it will be the private developers, the banks, and in fact, the entire, the economy will also take a major hit. So for that not to happen then, we really require the markets to start opening up. Now, Nepal borders India and Bihar on our southern side, and both those regions require quite a bit of energy, and power. So both of them are deficit at the moment, although UP seems to be doing better, but Bihar has quite a huge demand. So there's now this possibility that, and it's our shortest interconnection point between Nepal and India also. It's just across the border. So we need to start looking at how this interconnection can take place. So now I think that'll bring me to the question that was asked: is what are the challenges that we in the private sector face then? Well, first challenge is, of course, the connectivity itself. That the physical connectivity of between the two nations, the cross-border lines, that needs to take place, because in the absence of major transmission infrastructure in place, we're not going to be able to build. We're not going to be able to trade. So I think that is a major bottleneck right now. Although we seem to be working and getting a few things done every few years, I think if we want to look at this in a big in a big way, we need to make sure that there's this interconnectivity thing, happens quickly and happens for large quantum of power. I think that's a major thing. The other thing that needs to happen is, although India has come up with, the cross-border regulations, trade regulations, the guidelines, we're now in a process of waiting for the conduct of business rules. I think all these regulations need to be harmonized between the neighboring countries, because we're all sovereign democracies and we all have certain ways of working. But when it comes to electricity trade, we need to make sure that we're all synchronized, we're all on the same page, and that hasn't happened yet. So until our regulators and until our dispatchers know exactly how we're going to get this thing going, that's going to be a major bottleneck. So I think that is something that needs to happen very quickly. Um, Also, we've now got one model where we've got one specific project in Nepal that now has a trading agreement with Bangladesh uh, through India. So I think we've got one model in place, but now we need to look at different models, and that includes having trading platforms in India and Nepal, having the private sector involved in those trading platforms, trading companies active on both sides to be able to trade, to be able to collect, to aggregate energy in Nepal and then to trade with partners in India. So I think all of those will require some time. Those trading companies, trading partnerships, those will need to be built up. We do not have actually in Nepal, we're pretty far behind. We actually don't even have laws that allow cross-border trading. So Nepal will first have to actually come up with the laws before we can even start about licensing traders to do this. So these are the major things those are the impediments right now. So I think, but also one major thing that we need to talk about is how there needs to be trust between the trading partners. Oftentimes we've seen even technical issues like power trade are sidelined by political considerations. So until we can pull these things out of the political considerations and make them purely business to business deals, they're not going to succeed. So it's very important that we focus on the trade and the technical aspects of it and the commercial aspects of it, and leave out the other considerations that countries like to engage in, that actually hinders the environment for trade and business. So I think, for all that to happen, I think the private sector is a good vehicle. I think if to talk about business and trade, of course, the government, the regulators and government agencies are required. But if we can focus, if we can get these efforts through the private sector in Nepal and in working with the private sector in neighboring states of India, I think that'll go a long way in getting things done. Lastly, what I'd like to say is, in the hydropower business, my investment today starts by looking at the market that's 10 years down the road. I cannot, if I start looking at a river now, the time it takes for me to study it, to finance it, and to build it takes me 10 years. So we need to look very far out into the future, minimum 10 years, to actually see where the market's going, see what my demand is, and then those risks need to be absorbed, need to be considered before I make my investment. So it's a very difficult and a risky market. But if we can come up with good forecasts, good trends, and then all the regulations that are in place, I think it can still be a good business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Once again, you also given a very good picture about market scenario, as well as current challenges in the electricity trade between India and Nepal, from the Nepal perspective. And all of your points, I think, I noted down 4 or 5 points, and I find that all are quite relevant. And both the countries need to take up, on a priority basis, addressing these issues. Infrastructure needs to be developed. Trading partnership between both countries need to be developed. But more importantly, as you said, that one of the points is the trust between both the countries. And keeping the politics out. We will as move forward in this discussion. But I would like to go to my third and the final panelist in today's discussion, Mr. Gyanendra Lal Pradhan, who is Executive Chairman of the Hydro Solution Private Limited, Nepal. So another Nepal perspective would like to get. And Mr. Pradhan, I would like to ask you in a very specific question. One is very similar, like how you see the potential, currently the Nepal potential, what is economic potential considered as a 43 gigawatt. Its hydropower sector in Nepal is moving forward, what are kind of an intervention you expect from other neighboring countries, but also India needs to take in terms of developing the hydropower sector from a South Asia energy trade perspective. These countries should take a step to develop the hydropower in Nepal. That's the number one. The number two is what are your expectations? So I think there's a follow-up, a very similar question, is what are your expectations from an Indian government in facilitating this transboundary energy trade? As Mr. Agrawal has said in his speech, that Nepal hydropower has a very important role in balancing evening load. So from that perspective, Mr. Pradhan, I would, and the rest of the participants also like to hear your perspective. Mr. Pradhan. Sir.
Oh.
So we are unable to hear you. No, sir, we are still not able to hear you.
Sir, you are mute.
No, sir, no voice.
Uh,
So no, sir. So please check at the left hand side of the corner, the mute option. There is one option. You can select a microphone or a speaker. No, sir. No, sir.
He's not mute, his mic is on.
His mic is on. No, sir, can't hear you.
Sir, I would suggest that you check the microphone or mic in your system. On the left side, there is a mute button. No, we can't hear you right now, sir.
Okay. So you can join via phone if possible.
So, yeah, that will be an option that, sir, you can join by phone. And if you are joining meanwhile by phone, I would like to go to Ms. Jyoti Parekh, who is right now joined in this discussion. And before Mr. Pradhan will, the technological issues from Mr. Pradhan's side will be sorted out, we would like to hear from Ms. Parekh about her view on this whole India-Nepal energy trade and how she sees that whole issues unfolding in terms of the new regulatory provisions coming in India, and also there is a new concept of a one world, one sun, one grid that the Indian Prime Minister has announced, and the new Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is started working on this concept. So Can we hear something from Ms. Parekh?
I was not planning to speak. I was just, anyway, I'm glad you are holding this because I was just curious about how state and country level dialogue can also take place. And normally it is country to national agencies. But this is also an interesting perspective, and I'm glad you've taken that up. I would have liked to hear a little bit more from Nepalese side. Well, we have done many things, and much of what we say is already out in the public domain, especially we have said supported One Sun, One Word initiative, and I think its power trade is a good way to link the region, not just region, but beyond the region also, Southeast Asia through Myanmar. Say in the west side, Pakistan and beyond would have been if we had done it much earlier, perhaps we would have been more at peace. So there is a big peace dividend in power trade, and interdependence can lead to a lot of goodwill on both sides and friendship. And that is something that one should not miss out while you always talking about techno-economic benefits. I hope this Nepal-India prospers, trade goes further, and also the challenge is that now with the new renewable prices falling, what would be the scenario in future? How does the hydro and solar? In our earlier work, the solar prices were, we had only looked at hydro and thermal competition between the two countries, India and Nepal. But now there is a possibility to look at a very different scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your thoughts and views on this topic. Now, I would like again to move to Mr. Pradhan. If his now technological issues has been sorted out, we can like to hear from Mr. Pradhan.
Thank you very much. Actually, the mic was something wrong with the mic. It was on, everything was okay, but there was some problem. Anyway, now I think it's okay now. I was saying in Asia, India was the first to bring the hydropower station in Darjeeling for one house for the British, and Nepal was the first to bring the commercial hydropower in 2011, almost 109 years. After that, if you see the progress of India and if you see the progress of Nepal, it's very, very slow, because there was no regional cooperation when we need for that one, for which we are moving now. What I want to say that water and energy got no nationality. Any water flowing from Nepal, we call Nepali river, it's going to India, it became Indian river, it became Ganga. Same like electron, the Nepalese electron, there is no nationality. Once it goes to Bangladesh, it's a Bangladeshi power. It goes to India, it's that one. So all this water should be out of politics. In the past, there was too much politics in water and energy. That's why the progress was very less. I want to bring you some new data, which we have recently done in CNI. That I hit the Energy CII. We have CNI. I hit the Energy Development Council. What we found a new number. If you convert all our energy from wood, from petroleum product, from coal, from gas, from electricity, and if you see in electrical term, we need about 154,000 gigawatt hour every year. 154,000 gigawatt hour every year, whereas we are supplying only 6,400 gigawatt hour. That's less, almost 4% only from electricity. So this ample market for Nepal to grow from 1,500 megawatt. So we found that up to 5,000 megawatt, Nepal can consume within next 4-5 years for the domestic demand. And more than 5,000 megawatt, naturally, we need export market, because without export market, no hydro is feasible. I give you one example. Right now, Nepal is designing at, let's say, if you see the peak output during wet months and the dry months, this is about 3.5 times. Any plant producing 100 megawatt in dry months becomes 350 megawatt in wet months. But that is not the economic optimization. If you go to economic optimization like in India or in Bangladesh, or sorry, Bhutan, they go up to 7 times. So this 83,000 megawatt is not true. If you develop 83,000 I'm not going to the exact number, I'm going to the thumb rule. Nepal's theoretical potential can touch up to 200,000 megawatt, because our Q factor will be low, and whatever plant we are producing now, let's say like 456 megawatt, can go up to 750 megawatt. I just give you one example that other three, Nepal was planning to develop at 300 megawatt. Now the Indian company Sutlej is developing at 900 megawatt. So it became 3 times. 300 megawatt became 900 megawatt. The power became cheaper. So the regional cooperation is must for Nepal also. Next, I want to bring you some new financial data that what we calculated in Nepal that if our budget is, last year our budget was almost, let's say, 1400 billion Nepali rupee for 1 year. But what we found, at electrical price, at the present electrical price, the total Nepalese, mostly for the cooking, how much energy they consume. We calculated that this is 2140 billion. Means if you see our annual budget is 1400 billion, our energy consumption cost for the whole year, for the whole Nepali, for all sector is 2140 billion. That's much more than budget. I don't know about India. I did some little calculation about India that if you convert all your energy sources, like from cow dung to udon to petroleum product to everything, I think your energy cost will be much higher than your annual budget. That's possible because I talked to a few experts, and then we found that in developing country, always the first biggest cost for any country is energy. Then comes the budget. Then comes the food. Then comes the logistic cost. So these are the issues I think we're not coming up. If we really go forward with all these numbers, I think we have to focus. Next, COVID not good, but we must thank COVID for one reason. The Mount Everest was possible to see from Bihar. From Kathmandu, you can see Mount Everest very easily now because of the clean this thing. Because the power pollution, the vehicle pollution, the industrial pollution is going down almost to the zero level. So this is much better than that one. So what I can see that I will go to your question first, that Nepal's potential depends upon the market. If you go for domestic market, Nepal's potential may be only 30,000 megawatt. If you go like this, we may be 84,000 megawatt. If you go together with BBIM, that's especially Bangladesh and India market, then we can optimize all our power plant to the maximum economic level, like 300 megawatt or become 900 megawatt, and our theoretical potential can cross about 200,000 megawatt and our megawatt. So that's a huge energy. And if you see the problem for Nepal, the biggest import is energy. If you see the problem for India and Bangladesh, the biggest problem is energy. Whenever the price is going up, we all are in trouble. So I think we have to make it more and more regional. And the best part is that whenever Nepalese river having the maximum water, that's during June, July, August, September, the power demand in India and Bangladesh is maximum. And a solar, which India is going in big way, is never commercially viable or the economically good without picking power station for the evening. That's only hydro, like Mr. Agarwal said just now. So regarding potential, we have sufficient potential for the renewable energy, the best one for the solar in India, the best one for hydro in Nepal and Bhutan, and of course some part in India, that one. Next, what I can see that this going government to government between Nepal, BBIN, let's say, not going to solve a problem. Like any product I produce, I can go to India privately. I can sell it. The Indian manufacturer can come to Nepal. That's why our trade is maximum. But why our trade in electricity is so low? Because we have only nodal agencies, government agencies to talk. So the India BBIN, I say, especially Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, power market should be open for private sector. It should be open because there may be some problem between India and Bangladesh because they are big, let's say, market, almost 20,000 megawatt in Bangladesh, almost, let's say, 200 gigawatt in India. There may be you need some regulation, restriction, so many things you need. You have to control frequency, system voltage, everything you have to check. But regarding Nepal, India and Bhutan, we don't need any good regulation. I think we are almost in Indian system now. Half of Nepal is in Indian system. Bhutan and India is already in the same synchronized system. So what I can see that I think if we make our technical system matching to each other between Bhutan, Nepal, and India, the power regulation, power import, power export will be much more easy because we can't take too big power from India or we can't supply too big power to India. Same as Bhutan. I think it takes time. So this intervention, what we need is that between Nepal, Bhutan, and India, the power market should be totally open on synchronous basis, not back-to-back or DC basis, or on synchronous basis, which we are doing right now. What I expect from India is that I think India, like now, the power price is going down. The price in hydropower, we load everything to the energy only. Hydropower is not option. I always say hydropower is compulsion because it's mixed with water. It's mixed with flood control. It's mixed with navigation. It's mixed with, let's say, food security for through irrigation. So hydropower is not option, but we are going slow and slow. So we have to make hydropower as a compulsion. And whenever we design hydropower, everything we load to the energy only. That's why it looks a little bit expensive. Although in long term, hydro is the cheapest than any other sources of energy. But in short term, initial stage, the cost is going high. So why don't we make some norms that, okay, if 100 is the cost, let's say 100 point is the cost, why don't we give 25 points for the flood control? Why don't you give 25 points for the food security? Then why don't you make the 50 points only for the hydropower cost? That will make the hydropower cheapest in the region and cleanest in the region. That will make Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and Bhutan to go further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pradhan. Again, very good perspective. We get it from Nepal. I would say, reacting to your last point that the hydropower is cheapest in the long term, I would say there's in the new electricity amendment, hydropower is now being considered as a renewable energy in India also, large scale hydropower. And there is a hydro purchase obligation is also being proposed. So possibly there is a new market for the Nepal hydropower is opening up in India, in Indian utilities, because of such a high potential in Nepal. I agree with you. A lot of these points of regional cooperation is not much happening, at least in the power trade segment. This need to be open up for people to private players engagement in the power trade. There is also about that the hydro should be look in conjugation with solar energy. So it's a hybrid model of a hydro and solar need to be explored in India. These are very interesting, some of the suggestions, but most importantly is also about synchronization of the grid infrastructure, both in Nepal and India, so that the power can be flowed seamlessly. We have all these three panelists spoken about their perspective, their understanding of these issues. And we got some question also. So, Ashwini, if you allow me, I would like to extend this discussion for another 20 minutes, if it's possible.
Sure, sir.
Everybody is interested, because we're not able to take up other questions. So, if I head with so first question is to Mr. Agarwal, to you, and I think this question is coming from Mr. Parmanand Singh, and his question is, there is a suppressed demand between peak and off peak. What is the present transmission capacity between India and Nepal, and can this capacity be increased to bridge the gap?
Okay, yeah, it's a very relevant question. And as I tried to show in my slides also, currently between India and Nepal, there is Dhalkebar Muzaffarpur 400 kV line is there, which currently is operating at 220 kV, and power of the order of around 250 megawatt that is being transferred. Up to that 250 it can be transferred. Then between Bihar and Nepal, there are a number of radial links, 4 numbers of 132 kV lines and another 66 33 kV lines. Another power quantum of around 250 megawatt, even 400 up to 400 megawatt also sometimes flow on this line. And what we can see is generally during the wet period, they are lightly loaded. And during the daytime also peak, generally the power is flowing to almost the full capacity. Otherwise, the margins are available. This his specific query is how it can be enhanced is basically Dhalkebar Muzaffarpur line is a 400 kV line. And it has been strung at 400 kV. The only issue is at Dhalkebar, that 400 kV substation that is being developed. It is due for some time, and I think fast work is being done in Nepal. Once this is upgraded to 400 kV level, and they have a provision of 315 MVA transformer to be installed at Dhalkebar substation. So then there would be enormous capacities there. And then basically within Nepal, Hetadua, Dhalkebar, Inarbua, their main link, that has also to be developed. So there are 2-3 points are there. Upgradation, this substation to 400 kV, it has to be done. Then within the Nepal, the intra-country network, that is to be developed. Once they do that, then the capacity of this line can immediately be enhanced, more than double. That is the immediate part. And for the further extension, if they want to do, naturally, the Gorakhpur, New Butwal and other lines which are being, but they may take a couple of years. But presently, the low-hanging fruit is from Dhalkebar Muzaffarpur, upgrade to 400 kV and strengthen the internal network within Nepal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. So the next question, although this question is from Mr. Pushparaj Mishra, and although he not indicated whom this question is being addressed, but I will ask this question, and any of you, if you'd like to take up this question, is today we are using PPA in case of solar. Instead of PPA, can we use power exchange obligation? Anyone like to answer this question?
Shall I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. If you see the country's trend, no, India is very strong in solar. Of course, they are very strong in hydro too, but because of population, because of the religion places like let's say Rishikesh or all these things, developing hydropower is not that easy in India. But developing hydropower in Nepal is still very easy because mostly Nepalese, they love to sit on the top of the mountain, and all these river banks are empty. So putting dam and storing is much more easy. So I can see India is very strong in solar. Nepal and Bhutan is very strong in hydropower. But if we make too much regulation, to send some electron from one country to other country, the trade will not happen. The trade not going to happen. So I just give you one example. When we produce, let's say, 456 megawatts from Tamakosi during wet months. During dry months, we have only 90 megawatts production because there's no sufficient water to make a 456 megawatt. We have to buy power from India. And good news that from 2021 onward, Nepal will be a net exporter of electricity to India from 2021. Most probably, wet months, 4 to 5 months, will be giving more power, excess power to India, and we'll be taking 7 months what power we need during dry months. So the best option I learned in Canada is that it's energy banking. Energy banking is the best way which Hydropower Canada and the New York Power Exchange 100 kilometer long, very extra high voltage transmission line. We are so lucky. Hydropower you can't take to 10,000 kilometer far, not like oil or fuel. But we are so lucky. The potential is very near, just 200, 300, 400 kilometer far. The market is very near, and it's a huge market. Our energy per capita is very low. So the best way I found to increase the cross-border trade is that the energy banking should be open. If energy banking is open, the best part is that when we have excess, let's say, generation during June, July, August, September, or October months, the demand in India and Bangladesh is highest. And when our rivers is going down, your demand is going down. So we can import some power from India during the January, February, all the dry months. So the best is if you go to energy banking, not talking about the cost. We talk only kilowatt hour. Okay, so many kilowatt hour we give informants. So many kilowatt hour we take it back. Then we can set some numbers. Okay, what is the timeline difference? Maybe 5 months or 6 months, like Himachal Pradesh is doing with the central grid right now. The same model is possible between these 2 or 3 countries. That will make power this transmission from cross-border very, very efficient and very, very fast.
Thank you, Mr. Pradhan. In fact, I agree completely with you that we need, for a trade, we need a minimist regulation, but regulation which should be fully complied with. We definitely need a regulation, but not a regulation to hinder the trade, but to facilitate. And that's what I think this whole conversation about the subnational energy trade is, how the renewable potential of each countries can be shared and utilized by the other countries also. There is one more question and a couple of questions I also have, but before asking these questions, if someone, so the next question is also from the same person. So if any other person have any question, you don't need to type it in the chat box. You can just unmute yourself and ask the question to any panelist if you like. It's 1, it's 2.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Saurav.
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My question is to all. Anyone can answer. The first thing is, the first panelist indicated that the cost of generation between in India and Nepal is somewhat similar. Adding on it the uncertainty cost related to trade across the border, and seeing the present turmoils in the relationship between the 2 countries, which might have been there. Do you think it will be feasible to make trade, not banking, but normal trade of energy between India and Nepal? Secondly, the cost of generation appears or has been indicated to be much higher in Bangladesh. So how feasible it will be for India?
I think we lost him. But if anybody like to answer. Yes, Mr. Agarwal.
Yeah, so Saurabh, yeah, good question. And I have understood your question. Right now, I think your connection has been lost and all that. As far as the cost is concerned, in my presentation, what I showed, that was the average power purchase cost, basically, and India being a very large system and taking into consideration all the costs, and it is coming out of that order. But again, as you would be knowing, the recent renewable purchase cost, that has come down very low, of the order of around 2 rupees 60 to rupees 70 paisa, while there are some higher cost generating stations are also there. So that is how the average cost is coming out of this order. As far as the trade between Nepal and India is concerned, as I stated very clearly, Nepal has hydro potential, and hydro potential has a particular value of balancing. So what you have to do is, if you try to give the power as a pure hydro power, then perhaps the competitiveness may be slightly challenging. But the moment you give it for the balancing part and all that, definitely this would become more attractive. There are new methods are there. In fact, the pumping station, closed loop pump hydro energy station and all that, they give very pure balancing. In fact, in the recently there was a order placed by SECI on one of the large developer where the cost has come out to be around 6 rupees. That is pure balancing power in a closed loop pumped hydro energy station. So those type of avenues, while you look at your stations, hydro generation, you have to look at those avenues also. In fact, I was looking at, you have some provision of Dhudkari storage, 635 megawatt upper Arun hydro energy plant, some 1060 megawatt, those type of potentials are there. So this is a long-term planning, but ultimately you have to look towards that power also. Regarding the other power, hydropower, definitely as I had shown in my slides, the Bangladesh as well as Sri Lanka, the power price is quite higher. There is a good arbitrage is there. So the hydropower, what you generate, still it can replace those, the Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, it can replace much economically. So there, those avenues are there.
Thank you, Mr. Agrawal. For another, there's another question. This is from Mr. Ayush Rastogi. I hope, Saurabh, your question has been answered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay. So there's a question from Ayush Rastogi, and his question is around on the one sun, one world, one grid concept. Is there any challenges foresee in terms of the infrastructure and regulation?
Yeah, I can take this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so definitely it's a very far-sighted view, and because works on the principle that globally the sun never sets, and we have a time diversity around 4.5 years if we look towards the eastern side, Southeast Asia, almost equal time diversity if we look towards West, the Middle East and all that. So good time diversity would be there. Then seasonal diversity, all those things would be there. So the concept is definitely could be very rewarding, and particularly if we want to look for the energy sustainability and all that. As far as challenges are concerned, definitely when we work on these type of projects, in the initial phases, because the transmission network in any case has to be brought up in the beginning, particularly even if we start doing it in the phases and all that, we connect say Middle East with the Western India to start with, and on the Northeast, Southeast Asia also, Myanmar to go further. So the transmission expenditures, infrastructure to build up the transmission infrastructure, definitely the cost would be involved, and gradually it will build up. But these type of projects definitely in the initial run we may find out to be challenging, but once the quantum of power flows increase, then definitely we find those to be very rewarding. I'll give a very simple example. For instance, even when Bangladesh, India, we were making the link, 500 megawatt link, we were making initially 250 megawatt power was flowing and all that. And immediately once they started taking up, they found it to be that within a few years, the cost has been recovered. Then they went for the second link and all that. So meeting the initial cost stuff would be challenged, but we look at the long-term sustainability. Definitely this would be a very rewarding scheme.
Thank you, Mr. Agrawal. I would actually like to ask Mr. Kumar Pandey another question very related to this particular topic of one sun, one world, one grid. Whether you see that this concept need to be expanded to not only limited to solar, but also to include the renewable, so that the countries like Nepal can be benefited also?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, as Gandhi just mentioned, I mean, electrons don't have nationalities. I mean, once you put it on the grid, it's the same thing. So so the concept of interconnecting each of us, physically first, and then through the networks for power supply, it will go a long way towards, as someone said earlier, that actually help build the trust also. So once the interdependency is established, then we have no choice but to trust each other as well. So I think that's an important thing. But one thing I'd like to also go back and talk about is, Agrawal Sahab quite eloquently explained how balancing power, the price of balancing energy cannot be just talked about as just what kilowatt hour was was reading on the meters. Just as important is also the environmental aspect of it. I mean, the projects, the generating projects along the Nepal-India border are presently, producing electricity through dirty coal, through furnace oil, and things like that. Those have a tremendous environmental impact, not only in India, but all the way up to our Himalayas. We see, I mean, part of the soot that we see on the Himalayas now is from the smoke and ash that's being generated there. So we must all look at the power that can be generated in Nepal, the hydropower that can be generated in Nepal, as not only just kilowatt hours, but also environment-friendly, reliable kilowatt hours. I mean, I think that's something that cannot be forgotten as we price the energy from hydropower in Nepal.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Yes, sir.
Abhishek, I'll just like to add one line. Though the scheme is one sun, one grid, but definitely the electrons has no colors. So once the infrastructure network is there, definitely on that network, the hydropower, wind power, any other type of power that would flow. Basically, the scheme is coming by that name because the sun is available almost. We make the grid electricity available throughout the day, 24 around the clock. But once the infrastructure network is there, definitely the hydropower from Nepal may flow, from Bhutan may flow, the power would flow.
I think, sir, yes, sir, Mr. Pradhan.
Actually, when we say energy, we have to see what hydro is supplying, what solar is supplying, what thermal and this nuclear is supplying. The market demand is changing every minute. And if you see our evening peak and let's say demand, it's too much up and down. And because of LED bulb, the electricity demand is going not very high. But the air conditioning demand, once people are little bit, they have money. India is very hot country. Bangladesh is a very hot country. Even the southern Nepal is very hot country. People buy air condition. Maybe your house can run with a 0.5 kilowatt load for the whole light, but your air conditioner will take minimum 2 kilowatt. The single air conditioner will take that one. So this evening load is not going to decrease. That's number one. Second, India is going in very big way in solar. So once you add more and more solar, after 3 or 4, who will supply the solar part? Neither the thermal, neither the nuclear is going to supply the solar part. And keeping in batteries a little bit far, and that will be costly. And when we compare this pump hydro or solar wind battery or the hydropower, if you compare these three, hydro is cheapest. What mistake we do is that we compare with solar and hydro. Hydro is peaking power. It's like battery in your touch light. So battery in your touch light is very expensive as compared to the light you have in your house. So you have to make two price, one for the peak power price and one for this one. And Nepal power is very much visible. It will be cheaper because Bangladesh already offered 9,000 megawatt to buy from Nepal for the peak power by 2040. And they're offering almost 7.72 cents, one of the highest in the region for the peaking power. I think that's why we should not compare the best power and the peaking power. We should make our best power price as low as possible, which solar is helping through India. Maybe Nepal will buy some power during daytime from India because India is producing at the cheapest solar power in the world, much cheaper than the hydropower. But evening power, maybe Nepal can sell, and these two prices should be different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We already overshoot the time, but there is one question from Bhishma Pandit, and I would think we should take this last question. His question is on the ancillary market will coming up and hydro might sell power rather than the energy because of lot of energy is coming to the grid. I don't understand what is this question here, but anybody would like to comment on this?
Okay.
I think I'll just make, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Pandey, go ahead. I would in fact say that with this question, and also I will add my question also to all three of you. It's a question is about this whole topic of the subnational energy trade between India and Nepal. And you all spell out what are the challenges, opportunities, where the steps needs to be taken. But on the priority basis, if one step which need to be taken immediately, what do you think from your country's point of view, from Nepal point of view, Mr. Agarwal, from India point of view, what the one step needs to be taken to address this subnational energy trade? And I start with in a reverse order with Mr. Pradhan first.
Okay, thank you. What I can see is that if you see Bangladesh market now very small. When two big market collaborate for the energy, you have so many technical problems. But when you go with the big power market and small power market like India and Bangladesh, Nepal, or India or the Bhutan. So first, Bhutan, Nepal, and India should be in one grid. Single grid, single system, single technologies, and we can make all our technical norms so easy and so easy for each other that the power trade will come between these three countries very fast. Of course, Bangladesh is almost 20,000 megawatt. You can't make everything open with Bangladesh because these are two sovereign country, different country. There should be back to back. There should be control system. But why we need control system between these three countries? So it should be open.
Yeah, Mr. Pandey.
Right. To just answer your question straightforward, the first step that we need to do is to have this, bilateral regulatory mechanisms in place. Because without that, without the assurance of that regulatory mechanism in place and the laws that go with it, we cannot commit any investments in this sector. So the first thing that we need to commit any investment, because as I said, the investment horizon is fairly large. It takes 10 years for me to start building a plant that I can eventually sell. If I don't see that legal and regulatory mechanism in place, then I will not be investing in that. I can build transmission lines as I go along. I can do other things as I go along, but I cannot forecast what the law will be, and I can't make an investment. So I think that is the first thing. In closing, what I'd like to say, I'd like to also comment on Vishmaji's numerous options is put there, but I'd just like to answer it in short. Like, the more RE that we pump into the system, the more stabilizing and balancing power will require. So I look at, RE can only be 10 to 20% of your total grid capacity. So for every megawatt or every 100 megawatt you try to inject into the system of solar, to balance that can be only about 10% of your entire system. So your net system then must be 1,000 megawatts, and hydro can play a big role in the other remaining 900 megawatts. So I really do not see RE taking away from these other stabilizing forms of energy generation. So, but some of the things he points out are real. I mean, when battery storage comes online, what happens to storage projects in Nepal? So those challenges are there, and we'll need to address those. So I think that's important. But finally, what I'd like to say is, major investments are being made in Nepal in the hydro sector. As I said, 3,000 megawatts are under construction. Another 3,000 megawatts of hydro are under pre-construction. I mean, these are already looking for financing to actually develop. And then another 15,000 megawatts are under study at this time. So there's this huge volume of hydropower that's being developed in Nepal, 25,000 megawatts. And all of them are eyeing international market, may that be in India or in Bangladesh. If that market cannot be realized, then all these projects will not be built. On the other hand, India can look and say, okay, there's all these projects that are coming up in Nepal. We need to make space for them so we can actually accommodate them into our system, because that will actually benefit both the countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. And the last, I think, closing remark is to Mr. Agarwal.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. And if you ask me a single point, if I want to look from the Indian point of view, what I find is lot of renewable capacity is being added in the Indian grid, lot of solar and wind. And there are very, very ambitious plans to add further renewable capacity, and the prices of renewable capacity have also come down pretty low. The single important point what I would like to come to be addressed at this particular moment is we should have a regional ancillary market. That is the most important point. In fact, already CRC has come out with a draft on the ancillary market and all that. Very recently, we had started the real-time market already we have started. In fact, there was one question was there, whether the solar and all that can be transacted for the short time in the real-time market, what the power exchange has started, half an hour interval, it can be done. So, but regional ancillary market is the another important point which has to come in the region where whatever renewable generation capacity is coming, that can be added, that can be addressed. And at the same time, the avenues in the countries like Nepal, avenues in the countries like Bhutan and all that, their avenues, their hydro potential is also valued, and that can contribute towards the addition of large renewable capacity in India as a, in particular, and in general in whole of the region. So regional ancillary market, that is one part. Or in fact, as a SARI EI team, we are already working it under the USAID program, and we are coming up with a report and concept paper also, that how this regional, what could be the market model for this regional ancillary market and all that. And Indian government, CRC is also coming out with a paper on the final regulations on the ancillary market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. So just to conclude this whole riveting discussion we had for last 1.5 hours, we scheduled to close it in by 1, and I hold it up many of people from their lunch at their home for last half an hour. We overshoot. But just to conclude, this is in a topic, the subnational energy trade, or I would say transboundary energy trade between India and Nepal is in a very critical issue for both the countries. For both countries, development challenges, but both countries trade and economic perspective also. There are a lot of technical issues attached with it, which Mr. Agarwal, Mr. Pandey, and Mr. Pradhan all in their talk highlighted. There is also issues about how the trade, the investment needs to be further explored in hydro, particularly in Nepal. How renewable, particularly solar and hydro, comes together in terms of meeting the energy need of both the countries during the summer period, during a wet period. How the wet period, the hydro comes from Nepal, and during the dry period, how the solar of the UP and Bihar can go to the Nepal. It's also how we need to stop discriminating from energy electron point of view, that energy electron is an energy electron, is not the resources from where it is being generated. So we need to be a very technology agnostic infrastructure we need to develop to facilitate this trade. But the most important thing I see from the current scenario at this point of time is the trust. Is the trust between the two countries. Is the trust between the two, not only two governments, it's between the two countries, different agencies involved in the power, energy, infrastructure sector. The two countries, the private sector needs to come together. Two countries, innovators, entrepreneurs, researchers, developers, think tanks needs to come together. And this is a kind of a platform we need more and more, where we can engage, deliberate, dialogue, and to identify what are the common points for us to work upon. Why I asked in the last one very specific priorities from each of the panelists is basically also for us to identify what is the priority area where we need to focus on. Because we cannot work on everything at the same time. We need to prioritize. And I hope that this kind of a deliberation will continue. CEED will continue this kind of a deliberation and facilitate energy trade perspective between India and Nepal. And we also see some real projects coming up on the ground, which this whole energy trade is not dominated by the fossilized fuel power, but more of the renewable resources. A purely renewable resource energy trade between India and Nepal develop, expand, and meet each country's development challenge. With this, I hand over the whole proceeding to Ashwini for conclusion. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me in this discussion. And if I made any wrong interpretation or representation of the fact, please accept my apology. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think most of the things are very well discussed. So I would just like once again to thank and extend my gratitude to all the eminent speakers and the participants who gave out their precious time for this event, for this webinar. And it was really a wonderful discussion to take place. And Abhishek sir, you moderated very well. And the speakers, obviously, they played their very great part. And I think it is one of the most interesting talks I have heard in last couple of months through a webinar and something like that. So I'd like to thank you all for taking this forward. If there is some questions left out for the participant, we are very sorry we could not take it out, but we hope that we can take it out on a personal email or a chat with you. I'll also like to point out that we would be going back to all the participants who participated. We'll get back with a report back to you all so that you can have a brief report of this whole session as well, with a link to the video of the whole session as well. So thank you all for participating. Thank you. That's all from my end.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Okay.
Yes, sir. Namaskar. Thank you.
Right?